27th day of June 2015. The Ochelli Effect is live. I'm your host, Chuck Ochelli. I do enjoy that bumper sometimes because it is a little trippy, and believe me, it's louder in my headphones than it is on any device you're hearing it on. So, have fun with that. Anyways, tonight I have Frank Gregory Ford on, and there's a good reason for it. You know, I was looking at this article that came out of Vice News on the 25th, actually. I thought it came out today because I've been having these power outages where I'm at. But I'm looking at this Vice News article, and I knew that I had to bring my friend Dr. Ford on to discuss this. But we're going to get to a whole lot of different things tonight. First of all, I do want to thank you guys for tuning in, no matter how it is you're catching this. If you're getting it further on down the stream from the YouTube. Listen how old I sound now. From the YouTube. From the YouTubes. Maybe I should just go into my deeper voice and talk about the old days. Never mind. I do want to thank you for tuning in any which way you decided to. If you've gone to ucy.tv/TOE and you're catching the show, you're much appreciated. Want to thank especially today Patricia, who I did not realize sent me some help via a donation, which is much appreciated, and whether you know it or not, is actually going to contribute to keeping me on the air, because been nothing but troubles lately for the financial situation. So, leaving all of that aside, let's get down to it. Thank you, Patricia, though. You are extremely appreciated, and I may forget, and thank you once again. I just got to sort through some things, and hopefully the power will stay on in this place. You know, and it wasn't just the drains. We've had a series of extreme weather sort of episodes that have swept over North Carolina, and I haven't gotten the brunt of it, but it has given me various interruptions in power. So emails and things like that, and some guests that I wanted to line up. There was a broken chain of communication. Don't worry, we're going to get to it, and we're going to get some new and interesting, exciting individuals on this show. Best I can, the way I see it. Anyway, let me see if I can grab Dr. Ford, because I do want to get right to this, because this is one of those things that aggravates the hell out of me when I see it. All right, let's see. Let's see if Dr. Ford is ready for me. Because I'm telling you, every single time I see one of these declarations come out anywhere in the media, whether it's alternative or mainstream, it doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that I know they're lying to us. I know that they're patronizing us. I know they're trying to make these huge announcements, you know, allegedly, regarding what's actually already occurred to sort of keep people happy. Uh, I'm hearing myself feedback a little bit, Dr. Ford. Can you just turn down your speaker a little bit? There we go. Okay. Well, little more maybe.
Okay.
There we go. I never test anything. It's always live, and this is the way things go. But I was setting up this article, and I'm going to read from it a little bit. And I know you've got a lot of things on your mind tonight, but I think we need to start here. And actually, it came across my newsfeed today, but because of all the power interruptions, I didn't realize it was actually published on the 25th. Okay, and this is from Vice News, who, you know, actually does some good journalistic work. Okay. I advise, even if you're not somebody who's into Vice News, I advise that you go check out one of the episodes on Celi Castillo, who is an incredible individual who links right to the Iran-Contra affair and the DEA and all of the incestuous relationships between different agencies regarding that long forgotten piece of American history, apparently, death squads, things like this. And of course, I've interviewed him not on this network, but I've interviewed him elsewhere, and just an incredible individual. So if you check that out, that'll be worth the price of admission wherever you find it. All right. So back to the article, like I said, that was published on the 25th, all right, which is 2 days ago now. Here we go. The headline reads, a former CIA official apologizes to, quote, every American, end quote, for Iraq intelligence failures. An intelligence assessment drafted by the CIA months prior to the March 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, asserting that Saddam Hussein harbored an active weapons of mass destruction, in parentheses WMD's cache, has been thoroughly debunked time and again. Okay? But even after the deaths of more than 4,000 U.S. soldiers and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians, wildly underestimated, that's my commentary. Back to the article. CIA officials have never publicly taken responsibility for getting the pre-war intelligence so wrong. Former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell, however, now owns up to the disastrous mistakes the agency made on the Iraqi WMD failures. Okay, the veteran intelligence official has written The Great War of Our Time, the CIA's fight against terrorism from Al-Qaeda to ISIS. That is obviously the title of a book. Back to the article, which offers a behind-the-scenes look at numerous security crises since 9/11. Morell writes in the book about the CIA's Iraq intelligence failures, and he apologizes to former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who told the United Nations Security Council on February 5th, 2003, that Iraq had, quote, biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more, end quote. When WMDs weren't located in Iraq after the U.S. invasion, Powell's credibility was destroyed. Okay, now I'm going to read this last quote here, and I'm not going to complete the whole article, but I just want to throw this at Dr. Ford, and then we're going to have to explain why it is he might actually take some of this personally. Okay? Okay, back to the article. Quote, let me tell you why I apologized to Colin Powell, end quote. Morell told Vice News before a recent appearance at the Richard Nixon Library to promote his book, quote, here's a guy who had a stellar reputation. Then ellipsis points, so joining into another sentence. And quite frankly, that reputation was tarnished when he went before the UN and laid out the case. Period. The case turns out to be wrong. Almost every part of it turns out to be wrong. Period. I knew he had said to folks over the years, quote, nobody from the agency has ever apologized to me, end quote. And so that's why I wanted to apologize to him. Ellipsis points. Okay, so joining another thought and last part of the quote. The apology applies to every single American. Morell was somewhat defensive when asked to discuss why CIA analysts were unable to determine that Iraq had abandoned its weapons program in the 1990s. He compared the analysis to weather forecasts. I'm going to leave the article alone there. And here's why, okay? For the uninitiated listener to my show, let's understand something. Dr. Ford, who has been a guest on my show many times, is quite willing to tell you that not only were weapons of mass destruction present in Iraq, but the idea that the program initiated in Iraq to create them was what they came from is absolutely ludicrous. Because their origin is from U.S. based, yes, you heard me, U.S. based corporate interests, specifically the Carlyle Group, having handled the logistics and everything else. And Dr. Ford actually gives you the entire pedigree when you ask him for it as to where those weapons came from. Now, Dr. Ford, has anything I have said outside of part of the article I just read been inaccurate?
Well, you won't believe, Chuck, all the humdrum that's happening right now. Since you called me 2 hours ago and told me, what was happening, I placed a call to Barbara Honegger, and who is probably the expert on 9/11 in the world. And she said, "Oh, Mike Morrell, yes. Let me tell you about Mike Morrell. And yes, he would be the only one who would have the integrity to step forward and say, yes, here's what happened. Here's why we did what we did. Here's what was wrong about the whole thing." Only Mike Morrell, not that imbecile John McLaughlin, not that clown John Brennan, okay, the converted Muslim John Brennan who rubber stamped all the visas allowing the 19 hijackers into the U.S. and then overrode all the safeguards to make sure they got into the U.S. No, Mike Morrell is actually, and was for a while, the acting deputy director of the CIA and their PR person. Any kind of public releases required with it, that required any kind of accuracy, it was Mike Morrell who did it. So, and another thing too is Barbara Honegger just reminded me, and I released this on your show, Chuck, a month ago? Remember when I said that the FBI has now come forward and said, hey, the whole issue on the anthrax investigation, that was a scam? Remember a month ago?
Right.
The FBI said that. So, and then I'm not surprised that this has happened, that they've come forward and said, and Mike Morrell would be the person to do it, as I said, and come forward and say, look, okay, here's what was going on. Yes, we knew we were erroneous, and I personally can vouch for that, because quite simply, I briefed the weapons status on Iraq to the National Guard, California National Guard. They wanted to know what type of weapon status the Iraqis had, and I briefed verbatim what the Jane's Book of Weaponry, International Weaponry, stated on weapons purchases from Iraq. And that said, look, they haven't replaced any of their weapons that they lost in the first Gulf War. Okay, they are sitting ducks. They don't have anything. There's nothing to invade and destroy. It's not a target-rich environment. That's what Jane's, the British publication Jane's, said early on, and that's what I briefed early on, so to military intelligence. So this is not surprising, to me at all. But I'm just waiting, and they're kind of dancing around the issue about the weapons that were discovered by myself, okay, and my other team members, the weapons of mass destruction that were discovered, and as you said, and you just said, and it's been on your show many times, that yes, those weapons of mass destruction were American-made, manufactured weapons that were used. That's the big difference, that were used. And they were dropped, of course, on the Kurds and during the Anfal campaign, and the Iranians during the Shah al-Rab campaign. So here we are now with the CIA, who has been busy saying all along, oh yes, we did a wonderful job. Don't blame us if things went wrong. Oh, haha, laugh, laugh. Big deal, haha. These things just happen. No, it was the agency. And what annoys me probably more than anything, the agency could have at one point said, look, they could have actually strapped on a brass set like the American taxpayers pay them to do. It isn't Dick Cheney telling the CIA what to say. It's the American taxpayers looking to the CIA to tell them the truth. Tell them the truth as they know it. All right? And they did not. The agency did not. They tailor-made, what they call pruned. They pruned the reports to tell the idiots of the Bush administration what they wanted to hear. All right?
Well,
what
right.
they wanted to hear.
Well,
and so that's why we, as you say, we invaded a country, a sovereign nation of Iraq, based on cooked intelligence information. And now here we are, how many thousands of Americans dead? That's the important thing. Forget the money that was spent on all of this disaster. How about the thousands and thousands and thousands of American lives that have been lost? All right. And now we're facing more thousands, being lost very shortly. That's what I'm sitting here stewing about right now, as you say this. Okay.
Right, but two things, okay? Two things I want to make real clear. Although you say forget about the money that was spent, when we are in an economic decline in this country, okay, and trillions of dollars are being dumped into an illegitimate war, okay, that was founded, the whole provocation for the war is founded on completely false pretenses, is founded on a doctrine which is un-American by its own standards, normally, okay, under normal circumstances. What we have here is not only the murder of thousands of people under false pretense, but we also have a great theft in order to bolster the corporate interests of so many other people. So I don't put the money aside. It's not more important than the lives, obviously, but I don't put the money aside. That's one thing. The second thing is I'm already getting an idiot in Skype, and I'm going to tell you something right now, and I'm going to answer you directly and anybody else who doesn't understand this is listening. Okay, yes, I'm aware that this man is releasing a book, and he puts out information based on what's in that book, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. That's what this is partially based on, what we're discussing right now. So it's not the CIA saying this, blah, 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 blah. This is your argument. You don't know how this works. Anytime a former CIA agent releases a publication of any sort, okay, that has anything to do with the agency, it must be fully vetted by the agency, okay? That means that that message in that book is absolutely approved of and signed off on by the Central Intelligence Agency proper. Do you understand that? So that means that they're not going to allow information to be published by former agents, okay? And they don't. They don't. If you've ever talked to any of them, you might know that. But let's put it aside, okay? Point is that at this point in time, they're making a partial disclosure about what's happening. But listen very carefully to what Dr. Ford says. It's still not the real disclosure. Here's a mea culpa for the point of satisfying some people who are still saying and still complaining that we're involved in a illegal war under fictitious and erroneous circumstances, okay? And that we've been continuously in and out of that war, although I argue we never did leave, all right? And, hey, does anybody remember Afghanistan? Probably not, except the people that have to go there. Maybe they remember it. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get those 2 points out. And then, but I mean, Dr. Ford, tell me I'm wrong, please.
Well, like I said, on this issue, always remember, and your listeners should remember, I was there. Remember? Exactly. Always remember, I was there. Okay. And I saw the disaster unfolding. I was actually, I did everything I could to prevent the disaster of Iraq. And here we are 12 years later, and virtually every week that goes by, there's a new revelation concerning this. All right. So I see things a little differently, and it's hard to think about the money when you're watching your fellow soldiers and intelligence agents dying. All right, it's hard to think about anything else other than that. That's the hard thing. And when I think about what was going on, all the skullduggery behind the scenes, backstabbing and carrying on, and the money that was being made, and as I've told your listeners, don't forget Operation Shell Game. You know, the billions of dollars that were made off of the distraction of Iraq. It was a distraction, folks, and all the oil that was shipped out, the refined products that were shipped out, okay, and by the way, all the purchase of weapons of mass destruction by Iraq, by our own people, okay, sold Hussein those weapons of mass destruction that he had. All right, what was it, Chuck? 2 days ago, that I called you and said, look, there's evidence now that that nuclear weapons are being assembled and smuggled into the U.S. by ISIS. All right, there's evidence of that. And guess where the detonators are coming from? They're coming from Iraq. Remember, and on your show, I stated about the 15 detonators, those nuclear pits that were discovered in the Al-Qaqa facility, okay, which have now disappeared, conveniently, have now disappeared. So we've got some real issues. And now, all of a sudden, the agency is claiming mea culpa, and Mike Morell is claiming mea culpa. Okay, this is pretty ominous. Okay, when he's admitting now that something is wrong, this is very ominous, and this is a portent for what's to come very shortly in America. All right, in America, we haven't seen the end of this. This is just the beginning. This is the bellwether of some really disastrous issues that are headed our way. All right, so that's the way I'm seeing this. This is not a happy revelation that Mike Morell is making.
Not at all. And we're not talking about this as a matter of historical record. We're talking about this because this is an emerging situation and people don't seem to understand it. I'm also going to tell you that, and by the way, at the top of the show, I did forget to thank our friends who apparently listen to us occasionally at the foreign desk at CNN. But anyway, we'll leave that alone. You and I had that discussion about that, didn't we? But
oh, yes.
Thank you very much for tuning in, however you're doing it. Appreciate it. Anyway, moving on. The thing is, this is exactly how this stuff falls into place, and it's going to seem as though, well, gee, we already admitted to all this stuff, and they just simply change the historical record regarding this. They tell you, well, we knew that this was coming. We knew that this and that was coming. We knew that there was this, and this disgusting term still to this day, this failure of intelligence. I refuse to believe that our intelligence agencies were unaware of what was going on. I absolutely refuse it. I think that they didn't want somebody like you to find these things, and I still say that because of your limited time in Iraq, there was the potential for you to uncover many, many more. Okay? So guess what? We're talking the proverbial tip of the iceberg here. There's the possibility of a great many other things that are still loose out there that weren't destroyed by British intelligence as per the weapons that you witnessed, okay? It was a British intelligence group that wound up disposing of them, wasn't it?
That was British technical intelligence, and they were actually in the same building as we were there at Balad. And the reason why we had to request British technical intelligence help in removing these weapons, these P-400 converted bomb casings, okay, was this. We were not used to dealing with, okay, we did not have the capabilities. This is the U.S. government did not have the capabilities of destroying chemical weapons. We didn't have it, all right? The British had the arc furnace, which is what was needed. They had the positive pressure units, which were required in dealing with something as deadly as VX gas. And they had the huge cranes to open the bomb bay doors, the bunker doors. That required some huge, massive cranes. And of course, this is all on film. This was all recorded for posterity. And they opened those doors, and each one of those canisters was at least 1,000 pounds. All right. So So the Americans simply did not have the destruction capability of removing and transporting and destroying those weapons. That's why we had to utilize the help of our British allies in hiding this unbelievable scandal. Okay. Now, what was even more amazing was all the communications that were going on after I reported those weapons, where they were, what they consisted of, and the general supply numbers that they could be ordered from our American stockpiles. Okay, they actually were stamped with those numbers. All right, but the transmissions to the Pentagon, to Washington, and to the UK were very dramatic, to say the least. It looks really bad when you invade a sovereign nation for quote weapons of mass destruction, and you it's like going to a party. Okay, everybody's dressed up. You better have a party when you get there. And guess what? All right, we arrived, and the weapons were ours. The weapons were U.S. manufactured weapons out of Fort Rucker, Alabama. Okay, very embarrassing. That's why CNN was never notified. That's why Hans Blix was never notified. Okay, it's because these were stamped, and the bills of lading said Carlyle Group. And by the way, I mentioned Carlyle Group. I got a call today. Carlyle Group is a very clever group. All right, they just purchased the L3 Communications company. All right. The L3 Communications, all right? That is the company that runs all military transmissions and aviation transmissions around the world. The Carlyle Group just purchased L3, okay? So you think these people are done? Think these people are finished? Think these people are going to give up a very lucrative business of weapons of mass destruction? Think again, all right?
I want to put an even deeper context on this by continuing a little more with the article, if you don't mind, because...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you didn't get a chance to read this, did you?
No, I did not. I was too busy calling Barbara Honegger.
Okay.
And she was shocked, too, by the way.
Yeah, well...
She knows Mike Morrell.
Right.
And so she was absolutely dumbfounded when she heard that.
Yeah, well, waiting to hear the rest of this. Just try and contain yourself while I read some of these lines, because it's going to speak exactly to what you were just discussing a few minutes ago. All right. So back to that article that I started with. Quote, "This is a very difficult business," end quote, he said. Quote, "Again, I don't know a harder job in the world than trying to get an understanding of what's the status of Iran nuclear program. Okay, of the Iran nuclear program, excuse me, period. Next sentence, or what's the status of North Korea's long-range missile system? Or where does Chinese military modernization stand? Or what are the plans, intentions, and capabilities of Al-Qaeda in Yemen?" Let's see what else we got here. Ultimately, Morrell said, the main reason, quote, "we were not able to come up with the right answer is that we didn't do our fundamental job of penetrating Saddam Hussein's inner circle with a human asset. So there was no information to give to the analyst to say, here's what this guy is up to. This was our failure and, quite frankly, a national security failure to get inside of Saddam's inner circle to tell us exactly what he was up to with regards to weapons of mass destruction." Okay, next paragraph. While Morrell leaves no doubt that the CIA failed on Iraq, he mounts a full-throated defense when discussing the agency's so-called enhanced interrogation program, which he doesn't like calling torture, because to call it torture says my guys were torturers, and they were told that they weren't. Okay, next paragraph in quotes. "I have no doubt, after spending months looking at this, that the program was effective," end quote. Morrell said, quote, "I've seen the intelligence that these guys provided before enhanced interrogation techniques. It was not full answers to questions. It was not specific information. It was not actionable. After enhanced interrogation techniques, full answers to questions, specific information, actionable information, there's no doubt in my mind it was effective. End quote. Next paragraph. His analysis is at odds with the damning findings of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which last September released a declassified executive summary of its mammoth report on the CIA's torture program, an investigation that took 5 years to complete, cost $40 million, and led to chilled relations between the CIA and the committee. Next paragraph. In fact, the hardest critique on Morell's book is aimed directly at Democrats on the Senate Intelligence Committee, including the panel's former chairwoman, Dianne Feinstein, who led the oversight effort into the detention and interrogation program and said what committee staffers discovered in millions of pages of CIA documents clearly rose to the level of torture. He declined to respond to some of the more brutal findings in the Senate report, such as subjecting a handful of detainees to, quote, rectal feeding, end quote, and whether that amounted to torture. So what did the Senate get it wrong? So how did the Senate get it wrong? If it pursued the CIA's own highly classified documents to reach its conclusions. Quote, one of the things I learned as an intelligence analyst very early on is it's very dangerous to speculate, end quote, Morell said. Quote again, when you speculate, you get things wrong a lot more than you get right, but I'll speculate for you with that caveat. Senator Feinstein made it very clear to everyone who would talk to her about this that she wanted the report to be the nail in the coffin of the country ever doing anything like this again. Well, when you're on her staff and you hear that day after day after day, and your job is to put this report together, it takes you in a certain direction. There's more to this article, but what do you think of that?
You want my opinion, Chuck?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. As any person who's been in the intelligence business, that's human intelligence. Okay, human. That's the spy business. That's the James Bond business. Everyone in that business knows that the most perishable thing that you can come up and gather is information, aka intelligence. All right. There is a perishable time. It is perishable. It's dramatic how short-lived the value of intelligence is, all right? So when it comes to something like torture, okay, by the time you get somebody that might be in a position of knowing something, the actual events of what he can tell you, whether it's enhanced torture or not, have long gone, okay? Look, for example, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, they were torturing via waterboard, and waterboard is torture. I don't care what that cretin Dick Cheney has to say. Okay, yes, if the Torquemada of the Inquisition outlawed waterboarding as torture, guess what? The imbeciles at the agency and the U.S. Attorney's Office didn't have any right using that as a method of enhanced torture, all right? Because the information they got from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was, years old? Okay? There was no ticking time bomb. There's never been a ticking time bomb, okay? So there's an issue with all of this, and the fact that the agency right now, right as we speak about this, okay, Mike Morell and John McLaughlin, they are the main proponents for utilizing the services of intelligence rendition to actually use torture, political assassination, kidnapping, abduction as a profit-making pursuit, okay? A profit-making pursuit. Mm-hmm. And these sites are called black ops sites. In these black operations sites, all around the world, okay? And the agency is running this. And guess who's providing the communications for this system? L3.
Mm-hmm.
L3, as I just said. Okay? So no wonder these people don't want to say, oh, yeah, torture is a bad thing. Okay? Torture, first of all, as the whole world knows, except for maybe these idiots in the agency, torture and the refusal, the reluctance to use torture in interrogation has been all that's ever kept us from receiving war crimes charges and brought up before war crimes commissions. All right? The Iraqis kept asking me when I was there, you people are Americans? They kept saying, you don't torture. What are you doing? Have you people lost your minds? All right? This is why we surrendered to you, because we didn't think you would behave like Saddam Hussein. All right? That's why we surrendered to you. And now look at Abu Ghraib prison. All right? And by the way, we still have not received a single hostage, okay, single prisoner back, American prisoner back from either ISIS or from Al-Qaeda or Iraq, okay, that were, any of our people that were taken prisoner with their heads attached, all right? And you go back and you look at the date on when this all started, it's very simple. It's when the revelations of Abu Ghraib happened, all right? Abu Ghraib. And of course, your listeners know me as the person who filed the charges to try to stop that lunacy that was going on at Abu Ghraib, okay? So,
well, right, because after
what?
all, that was your command. That was the command
Absolutely.
that you were part of that actually wound up a bunch of those kids that we saw go to prison. These are kids you knew you worked with. This is, this is not something that you saw on TV. This is who you are. You knew these guys.
Absolutely. I knew every single one of those kids. Quote, and to show you the deep concern that the command demonstrated for every single one of these people that were following the command's orders at Abu Ghraib prison and being responsible for the torture that I had to repair the damage on. Okay, as the medic, as the doctor, I had to repair the damage. I know exactly what was done to those people, and there was nothing that was in context with the Geneva Conventions, okay, and all the protections that the Geneva Conventions afford. No wonder the Bush administration did everything they could to keep from adhering to the Geneva Convention's protections of prisoners, because they wanted to torture people, okay? They wanted to remove those safeguards, okay? Understand that. I want your listeners to understand that. We wanted to remove the last vestige of humanity when we went to war in Iraq. And that's exactly what we did. We converted, we took, and this is General Petraeus. He transferred the Operation Q-Bark from Central America, from El Salvador, the torture chambers and the death squads, and transferred them to Iraq. He wanted to do that. General Petraeus. And who did General Petraeus work for before he just had to unceremoniously resign? Okay. He worked for the agency, the CIA. That's who he was the director of. All right. And that's who brought the torture, and that's who brought the death squads to Iraq. All right. Courtesy of Jeffrey Miller, Crazy Jeffrey Miller, and Colonel James Steele. We all know who James Steele is now, the butcher of Latin America.
Yeah, I was waiting for James Steele to come up here, because this guy is absolutely accountable for the atrocities which are still yet unreported for the most part in Central and South America, but we're aware of them in a general sense. Okay, but all the stuff that putting down political dissidents, the death squads, all that stuff, those wonderful mechanisms that assisted in Iran-Contra, okay, those affairs and the continuation of them ever after, because for those of you that think that all came to a screeching halt you're out of your minds. The Senate committees, the congressional hearings, all that stuff didn't put it to a halt. You know, it's like the old axiom, it taught them not to get caught next time, is about what it taught them. Okay, but that's the reality of that situation. And Steele, of course, is the perfect guy to pick up because he had carte blanche to abuse and destroy civilian and military assets alike in Central and South America for years. Years. Again, you know, Dr. Ford, if I'm crazy, just say, Chuck, come on. You're out of your mind. You're being a conspiracy theorist, Chuck. This doesn't make any sense. What you're saying makes no sense about what we're talking about. Please say that.
Well, according to Karl Rove, okay, that fountain of integrity, all right, Karl Rove, you would be considered a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
Putting fears and generating trauma that doesn't need to be there. Yes, according to Karl Rove. And unless you've been in a coma for the last 15 years, everyone understands the dynamics of Karl Rove and his damage control for the Bush administration when it came to this subject matter right here. So, no, you're absolutely 100% on the mark, Chuck. And thank goodness you're out there. You're getting this message out there. You don't hear this message on the major networks. Oh no, they're scared to death. Everybody's scared to death that they'll offend their major investors. All right. No, Chuck. Thank goodness you're getting this message out there.
Well, not a job I wanted, but there it is, man. This is the reality of the situation, and they not only transferred that program, okay, the Condor-like program, over to the Middle East, but they added to it. They enhanced it. Enhanced interrogation, yes. Sure. The program was enhanced. Okay, it was torture, so forget that. It is enhanced interrogation, as in they enhanced the torture. So really, it should be called enhanced torture, in my estimation. But again, I'm a conspiracy theorist, so, you know, don't listen to me.
Well, Chuck, torture, okay. Anybody that says it's not torture, okay. I want to see them, okay, in an enhanced interrogation session, all right, to see what really goes on, okay. Trust me, it will make every single one of your listeners vomit, okay, when they see what goes on in an enhanced interrogation session. As they say, a picture's 1,000 words, okay? Mm-hmm. And when you actually see this, as I had to, okay, and then it was up to me to undo the damage. When I'll never forget one morning, okay, and this was the morning I decided to file charges, when one of the enhanced interrogators walked out of a room, and there was actually smoke. When he opened the door, there was actually smoke coming out of the room behind him. And he said, Doc, take care of that, quote, piece of shit. Okay? Take care of that piece of shit. Okay? This is the kinder, gentler method of enhanced interrogation, as I found. Okay, walked in, and there was a 15-year-old boy on fire, collapsed in the corner. Okay? He was being enhanced interrogated. Okay? He was unconscious, thank God. All right? But that's what I dealt with, okay? Later on that afternoon, after 4 separate heart attacks of interrogation detainees, okay, I said, enough. I took the interrogator aside. I said, that's it, okay? These people are going to come in and they're going to kill us. They're going to drive a car bomb, okay? A vehicle delivered bomb, a V-bed is what they call it, a V-bomb, okay, right through the front door of this place. If they hear another kid scream, okay, we didn't have any glass in the police station in Samara, so everybody could hear everything going on, okay, and so I filed charges. Your listeners know I filed the charges. You talk about Senator Feinstein, launching her investigation. Who do your listeners think went to Senator Feinstein and said, this is what's going on, launching an investigation, You think she found that out, through some sort of beneficial organization, some sort of humanitarian organization like the Red Cross? Oh no, my command was too busy hiding the victims of this enhanced interrogation from the Red Cross.
Right.
It was me. It was me. All right, that went to Senator Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, John McCain, and Barbara Boxer, and I said, you better get off your duffs, quit sitting on your thumbs and rotating, and quit acting like a bunch of pompous assholes, and get an investigation going on, because we are going to have the largest set of war crimes ever in U.S. history happening very shortly. All right? Very shortly. And so, surprise. So, lukewarm as it was, they actually did launch an investigation. And what prompted it was the 60-minute release showing what I had to deal with, okay? What I had to deal with, okay?
Right.
And they only showed the public 5 photos.
Right, and honestly, there was a resonating problem. 60 Minutes was prompted by the fact that this stuff was spread all over the place through the internet. They got a hold of these things and only showed a very small number to the American public. But what we saw in those photographs was nothing compared to what was actually happening. I mean, to this day, you still hear them discussing stress positions. Okay. And, simulated drowning, they've kind of abandoned trying to soften that one up. And now it is just waterboarding. Okay. Which waterboarding, again, doesn't even actually sound all that bad. Simulated drowning, which they tried to replace it with, sounds a lot worse than waterboarding, in my estimation. But nevertheless, it's still the same thing. It is not something that is, just a stressor. Okay. It's lethal. It's lethal. First of all. So, in other words, applying pressure to a human body that can result in their death is still enhanced interrogation. I don't know. I remember the meaning of the word torture, at least the first time I saw it when I was a kid, and it seems to me as though all of these things qualify as torture. And to make another point here, really quick, and then I'll shut up and let you get back to it, because, see, I knew that would strike a nerve with you when I read that part. But here's the thing. When you're talking about the desensitized nature, because the guy that walked out of that room and told you to take care of that piece of shit, okay, that guy, this wasn't his first rodeo, first of all. And for him to come out and so callously deal with it that way, let me explain something to the listener. The scent, and I hope that I am not triggering any sort of PSD reaction with you, sir, when I say this, but the reality is the scent of human flesh burning is not something that is easily withstood by an average person. Okay, if you're aware of what it is. All right. So what are we talking about here? The damage done, the fact that it's going to blow back on U.S. troops everywhere, regardless of what they're doing, because now we are the people that torture across the planet. We are the people that don't bother to follow through properly on the rules of engagement. There's been a lot of revelations about that. What have we become? And does it help anybody? Realistically, does it actually draw up real intelligence? Listen to what you were saying just before. The fact that there's a shelf life to this stuff, the fact that information, and the other thing is, and this point, of course, made by many people in the mainstream, and I will grant them this, is that, if you waterboard anybody long enough, they'll admit to anything. I bet you if somebody waterboarded me, I would claim I was one of the hijackers on 9/11. Okay? If that's what they wanted to hear to get it to stop. And if you don't believe me, I'll tell you what, try it at home. Try it at home. To yourself, not to anybody else. Try it at home. See how it works. Enjoy that. Okay? But let's put it in full context. The fact is that the revelations of the entirety of the torture program, not enhanced interrogation, but really, truly the enhanced torture program, are still not fully in the public's grasp. Okay? And this was not a new thing that just happened to emerge. It wasn't an accident. This was the policy given to the troops to follow through with, not just CIA fictitious spies that may or may not be Jack Bauer types, which, again, as you point out, there's no ticking time bomb. So that whole scenario, that whole idea of having a time sensitive situation that you're drawing out of somebody and you torture them, and the hero receives the information necessary from the torture, is all a fiction. Do you understand that? And I don't mean you, Dr. Ford. Obviously, I'm saying this to the listener. But again, sir, tell me that I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, please.
Well, Chuck, yeah. One thing I've always been impressed with is the intelligence of your listener. The average intelligence of your listeners, okay, is pretty high, okay, and I have to say that except for a few 5150s and Cat J's that have called in, armchair commandos, cubicle commandos, as we call them in the trades, they're pretty sharp and they understand. And they definitely understand when they have been fed rectally a bunch of nonsense by our government. Okay, they're not going to listen to your listeners are not going to listen to your show unless they have questions, unless they have suspicions. All right, and as I've always said to your listeners, don't believe me. Please don't believe me. Go research. All right. And that's obviously taking an effect because what has happened with the Pentagon in the last few days, Chuck? The Pentagon has come out now with a new set of directives on how to aggressively deal with investigative journalists, okay? Investigative media people, all right? They are going to take a stand. The Pentagon is doing this. They don't want people investigating their behavior. They don't want your listeners investigating and learning and researching on these black ops sites and what are going on in these black ops sites around the world in 70 different countries. What's going on? Okay, mm-hmm. They don't want your listeners to go out there and say, let's take another look at this Carlyle Group, okay, or Booz Allen, all right, the logistic supplier for these black ops sites. Let's take another look. And if you think I'm joking, if you think I'm erroneous, you think I'm a conspiracy theorist, well, I'm the ultimate. Because guess what? Ed Snowden is trying to tell the people of America that this is true. What I have said is true. Okay, Bradley Manning, okay, released all this information. Okay, and you saw the reaction of our government and they couldn't put the genie back in the bottle. Mm-hmm. Okay, they just put him into a dark prison cell for the rest of his life is what they did. All right, so as a result of what, a couple of days ago, the Pentagon is in a panic. They are getting aggressive. You don't get aggressive if you're not afraid. All right, and they are afraid. Okay, that people are going to actually start saying, "Whoa, well, we heard this on Chuck's radio station." Okay, and all of a sudden, here's these people coming out and saying, "Yeah, this happened, that we're in the positions of knowing." What else are we being not told? Okay, what else is being kept from us? Okay, well, I can tell your listeners a whole lot more is being kept from you, folks. Yeah, like I said, Ed Snowden is trying to tell you, believe me, there is a lot more being kept from you. Okay.
Well, so, for instance, this immediately brings to my mind something that you and I have discussed, and here we go. Let's perk up our friendly listeners at the NSA, the program known as Copper Green. Okay? Well, gee, that's going to sound real familiar. Just really quickly, I wonder if you wouldn't mind providing to the listener what the definition of the Copper Green program is?
Well, of course, Copper Green is never acknowledged, okay, by anybody in the Pentagon. They just simply won't acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, like everything else, the Pentagon does when it's embarrassed. All right. Well, I ask your listeners to go do this. Just type in Copper Green on their computers. The very computers that they're sitting there listening to you on. Okay. Type in Copper Green. Okay. The reaction will be very, very interesting. All right. Copper Green is the evolutionary child of Operation Q-Bark, and Operation Q-Bark in Central America, El Salvador. Is there any person that's listening that doesn't know about the atrocities that now are just coming to the surface concerning El Salvador? Okay, if you think they're not, go look at the within the last 6 months, all the human rights commissions are coming out saying anybody involved in El Salvador, no matter who they are, they will be held responsible for the torture and the murder that was committed there. That's Operation Q-Bark. Guess who Operation Q-Bark is in this country? It's Dick Cheney, folks. Dick Cheney, all right? Mm-hmm. Dick Cheney, okay, that great draft dodger, okay? Dick Cheney turned right around when he was sec-def under George H.W. Bush. Remember, the kinder, gentler president? Okay, he turned right around and said, gee, that Max Sog program called Operation Phoenix in Vietnam, atrocious, infamous, okay, but it is perceived by neocons as being effective, okay? Whenever you get a body count out of something, it's perceived as being effective, all right?
Right, so, and it's easy to understand that he had firsthand knowledge of the Phoenix program based on the fact that he was part of the Ford White House. The Ford White House, I say again, okay, in the 70s. When we were extracting ourselves from Vietnam, Cheney was part of the White House staff, along with, his buddy Donald Rumsfeld. Gee, that name sounds familiar too, doesn't it? But, yeah. That's exactly right. So based on that knowledge, which he would have gained as being part of the White House staff at that point in time, here you go. This is how history repeats itself and seems to rhyme. I'll combine both schools of thought here. It definitely rhymes a lot. And Cheney, yeah, this is the guy who is the main driver to that whole situation. Not as though he did it all by himself. Let's not go there, because I don't think he could do a lot of things by himself unless he's got a shotgun and he's out on a hunting trip with a friend. But
if I might interject something about Mr. Cheney, okay, not everybody is a sleazy, greedy, bureaucratic sociopath, okay? Not everybody. There were actually several people, and I have all the communications from them to Mr. Dick Cheney, okay, that said, please do not do this. Our legal standing is tenuous, extremely tenuous. In fact, it can be assured that it is illegal to do the things that you are suggesting, Mr. Cheney, all right? Mm-hmm. Like I say, not everybody's a coward. A spineless jellyfish that's willing to destroy anybody just to go from GS-14 to GS-15, okay? Not everybody. No, there are some out there that are willing to stand their ground, okay? Dick Cheney was warned. He was directed, especially by Pentagon Legal, and it said, do not do this, all right? That was when he was looking to transfer Operation Phoenix to Operation Q-Bark, okay, in El Salvador. Mm-hmm. Operation Q-Bark, okay? And that's when they brought in Colonel James Steele and his always accommodating sidekick, Mr. Dobie-san, and who headed up El Salvador. Right. And also, and this should be a great name for everybody to remember, that the person who implemented the torture chambers in Nicaragua and El Salvador was somebody called Blowtorch Bob Suarez. Okay, and you've asked why would they call him Blowtorch Bob? Okay, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out, Chuck. Okay,
Yeah.
because he used blowtorches when he was being kinder and gentler during his enhanced interrogations of victims. All right, Blowtorch Bob Suarez. Thank God that son of a bitch is dead. Okay, because he would make a great one. Okay, he would make a great one to sit in Nuremberg and talk about the connections that the Bush administration had in Central America. Blowtorch Bob Suarez. All right. So next thing you know, okay, here comes Dick Cheney again. Obviously, dear old dad's going to stick him in the office to control Junior. Okay, W. All right. There's no question who controlled who. I don't think any of your listeners have any question about that either. All right. So the first thing they wanted to do was get a bunch of people, okay, in the Pentagon, compromised by doing something illegal. Okay. People that do things illegal always have dirt on them. They can be controlled. And that is the psychological aspect to all of this. So, all of this aspect, okay, of torture and abuse.
Right.
So they turned right around and said, okay, let's give this a legal cover, a legal veneer. So who did they go to? They went to, of course, California, the Ninth Circuit Court, and they made it real obvious. They said, if the Californians say it's legal, it must be legal. So they went to William Haynes, and William Haynes was busy justifying the insertion of Blackwater into Nigeria to brutally put down the Niger River Delta tribes that were protesting against the exploitation of Chevron. It was William Haynes who said, "Oh yeah, no, we don't see anything wrong with sending a bunch of mercenaries in to kill everybody. That's okay. That's cool." And he was doing that. And then John Yoo, okay, who could forget John Yoo? All right, Mr. Killer Elite himself, who was born in America but claimed that his family suffered abuse at the hands of the North Koreans. So he felt that he was justified in writing something up called the torture memo. So there was this thin veneer of legal respectability, okay, legal whitewash, okay, for this case. And we won't. Oh, and I'm sorry. And a judge had to sign off on all this carrying on, and so they had a Mr. J. Bybee, Bybee, okay, J. Bybee. All right. So all of those folks are responsible for giving Dick Cheney the right to go ahead and implement QBARC and transfer it to a sovereign nation that had not even been invaded yet. Sovereign nation, highly illegal to practice what is called pre-planned aggression. Pre-planned aggression. Remember that term, because that's what could get George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, and don't forget Dandy Don Rumsfeld, all in the dockets, okay, in the world court. That term right there, pre-planned aggression. They transferred the QBARC program to something called Operation Copper Green, the Copper Green Project. Innocuous sounding. God, that sounds like something kind of a gardening show that my grandmother would attend. Okay,
there you go.
How bad can it be? Well, guess what? Who'd they send over? They send over General Petraeus to implement it. Crazy Jeff Miller out of Guantanamo. Okay, Guantanamo, and then they send also to make sure everything really happens right, properly. They send Colonel James Steele. God, it was like homecoming. Okay. For all the Central American crowd, okay? So, so in a nutshell, now 70 countries have signed on to and are sending their malcontents, their discontents to these black ops sites and paying the Central Intelligence Agency a lot of money to take care of their renditioned insurgents, their rendition troublemakers. By the way, I am very familiar, I think your listeners know, about the term renditioned. As of, what was it, Chuck, a month ago? The International Criminal Commission has now given me the designation in Nuremberg as a super victim of rendition. Me, the humble Dr. Ford. I am a super victim of rendition. All right. So I do know what rendition is. That's what we have here. And now
and for the listener who may not have heard you before, let me just explain really quickly. The fact is that while Dr. Ford was there attempting to basically file criminal charges against his own command for war crimes, for the torture being committed there, and also making a bit of noise regarding the weapons of mass destruction that had been discovered by himself and his assets, okay, while in Iraq. All these things going on, what happens is he is the only American intelligence asset that I have ever known of to be renditioned and survive. He was personally taken captive, strapped to a stretcher, and injected with all sorts of wonderful chemicals to extract information about who he was talking to, who he had disseminated this information to, etc., and was illegally removed from an active theater of warfare, okay, in Iraq, and just simply taken away, okay? And honestly, had you not had the foresight to do a few things, I'm pretty sure you would have wound up out the back hatch of a transport plane and probably accidentally, through misadventure of some sort, wound up in the ocean somewhere. Okay? That's the reality there. Now, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. I didn't want to, totally throw you off track, but I just wanted to make sure, in case somebody doesn't know who you are, that's who you are. Okay? So...
Well, thank God for the modern miracle of communications, because when I realized what was about to happen, and there was, you try to follow the law, and we all try to follow the law, okay? And I was required to report any kind of war crime or even a question of war crime, especially as being a medical person. I was required by Geneva Conventions, if I saw something happening that even resembled it or looked like something bad, like a war crime, about to happen, it was my job to report it to a commanding officer. All right. I did that. Okay. And I did that, and the rest is history. So fortunately, like I say, I'm probably not as dumb as I sound. Okay. Hopefully I'm not as dumb as I look either. But the thing is that I immediately contacted via satellite phone my attorney. I kept an attorney all on call all the time when I was operating as an intelligence operative. Mm-hmm. And my attorney, who had been a judge advocate general attorney, immediately contacted somebody named General Stan McChrystal. And my attorney said, look, General, here's the deal, okay? We're not going to have any, what was it, the term, okay, fratricide issues, death by friendly fire, okay? My client is not going to be fratricide, okay? He is going to arrive breathing in the United States.
Right.
In the United States. He is going to be breathing when he gets here.
Right. Specifically, fratricide refers to the killing of one's own brother from the Latin terminology. That's what it means. Okay. And to be fragged or to be killed by friendly fire. There was a guy I remember that was most famously killed by friendly fire not long ago. Anyway, yeah, that's exactly.
By the way, That was Pat Tillman, all right? And Pat Tillman, Stan McChrystal had to really do some hustling to cover the Pat Tillman murder. It was a murder. He had to cover that up, all right? And in fact, break the law several times, in the attempt to cover up the murder of Pat Tillman, okay? Like burning, like cremating the body, like cremating all his body armor, okay? All of that had to be done, okay? And it was Stan McChrystal, okay? He didn't get rid of me because of altruistic reasons. Oh, no. My attorney called him and said he was going to be held personally responsible for my safety. That is the only reason why I was abducted and kept alive, even though I was tortured en route. Okay, let's face it. My guaranteed safe passage didn't include not being tortured. Okay, and I was actually abducted and carried through German airspace. The Germans are still furious about that. All right, they're furious about me being abducted against my will and being carried through airspace, German airspace, and being tortured. And if you don't think so, go cite the Der Spiegel article on me by Helmar Buchel, okay, the senior editor of Der Spiegel, okay? Right. He covered the whole issue, all right? So it's one of the most watched biographies of all time on German TV. So anyway, needless to say, yes, I was capable, and I was very lucky to get out alive. That I wasn't treated like somebody from Argentina. How they're taken out over the ocean and tossed out the back when they're interrogated. It's kinder and gentler, by the way. Okay, so and I say that is because our special forces and our interrogation teams were responsible for Argentina, taking those practices, doing those practices, torturing people, and then taking these drugged up people, taking them out over the ocean and throwing them out the back of a plane, okay, into the Atlantic. So anyway, I landed. I was able to land in Germany, okay, groggy after having MK Ultra drugs injected into my system, and there's no question. I have brain damage. There's no question about it. All right. The government has been evaluating my central nervous system, and they said, yes, you do have brain damage from these drugs that you were injected with, the sodium amytal drugs. Okay. Now, I have a strong suspicion that these drugs were injected with the idea of causing brain damage. Okay. That's why they were illegal. Okay, they were made illegal. Okay, these drugs.
Well, something comes to mind here, and this is a question I've been dying to ask you actually, on the air. Did you feel as though you might have been also dosed with something similar to LSD at that time? Because what I'm starting to understand, when I was having a discussion with H.P. Albarelli about the Frank Olson case. Okay, and some other people when I was doing background on that, all right, my understanding is that they have an enhanced form of LSD, which they still, to this day, utilize in interrogations in order to, not necessarily to extract the truth, but in order to place the subject in a completely paranoid and fearful state. Do you think that at any point that type of drug, because they have a version of this, which is something like 100 to 1,000 times stronger, depending on the accounts, than your run-of-the-mill LSD? Do you recall or have any sort of idea that you might have been dosed with that kind of thing?
As I remember, like I say, and this was not a situation where, as a doctor, I could establish some sort of pharmacopoeia dissertation. Okay. Mm-hmm. When you're being tortured, you don't have much of a chance to, ask your torturer what type of tortures they're applying to you. Okay. And discuss the moral principles of them. Okay. So I didn't have that luxury, but as I think I've mentioned to your listeners, when I saw the fluid from the IV running into my system, okay, running into my arm, okay, it was just something like this. It's like I felt myself blink, and that was about it, okay. And I came to about 4 hours later, all by myself, off in the corner. I'm still strapped in, okay, and for all intents and purposes, nobody was talking to me, and the plane was full of other people, okay, other soldiers that had been wounded, legitimately wounded, and so forth. But I got the impression that it was basically just to do the actions, the pharmacopic actions of sodium amytal, okay, and that's what sodium amytal does. It knocks you out. You have no sense of awareness of who you are, what you are. I could have been dead for all intents and purposes until I felt myself blink and kind of wake up 4 hours later. I could have been dead. I had no idea whether I was alive or dead, and that's what it could have been. But but later on, when I was able to confront the two psychiatrists that injected me, okay, and they did not want to talk to me at all, okay, very clearly, which basically confirmed everything that I'd said about being asked, first of all, who I contacted, or what I'd said to anybody, okay, and the points of contact in terms of phone numbers, and what I was going to do, okay, who I was going to speak to. Believe me, I had plenty of people in mind that I was going to speak to about the greatest war crimes that the U.S. has ever committed, okay, in its history. I was going to speak to somebody very quickly.
Right. So you know what?
Yes.
You know what though? Because you're not reporting that you had residual after effects, you weren't administered this like super LSD that they still use. Because that takes 3 or 4 days, and you would have definitely noted while you were explaining this, when you came 2, 3, 4 hours later, the amytal might have left your system or been pushed out by another drug. That's a possibility. But and obviously you don't know for sure, but I was wondering if there was any evidence of the use of it. But the thing is, if you had been given this super LSD, the residual effects are actually something that takes something in the neighborhood of 4 to 8 days to stop working. So if you were relatively okay but groggy, 4 hours or even within the same day, then I would say that you probably weren't dosed with that. But I was curious about it because that definitely has been proven to cause brain damage as well. Now, that's not to say that they might have given you a minuscule dose of it just to add to the terror situation, to sort of put you in a more compromised position. It may be that the only way you're going to find that out is through a spinal tap to find out if those type of chemicals
the
were
only
introduced.
thing, like I say, you're not in a position when you're being tortured and abducted in rendition. You're not in a position to have a medical dissertation about what they're doing to you. Okay,
no,
they don't want to talk to you after it's done. Nobody wants to talk to you. They all want to act. They all want to act like you were never there. All right. Now, on my records, I was able to obtain in the doctor's own handwriting. Okay, like I said, I'm not as dumb as I look or act. Okay, so I was able to obtain these handwritten records, and they very clearly stated that they had given me an anticonvulsant. All right, in addition to whatever it was, and I'm assuming it was sodium amytal, but they very clearly spelled out an anticonvulsant, okay, to keep me from perhaps slipping over, nosing over into what are called the different planes of consciousness, all right?
Right.
And as you go further into different planes of consciousness, the damage is greater as you go lower, all right? So there's 7 planes of consciousness.
To sort of illustrate that to the listener, here's the thing. They can sort of incapacitate you but still leave you capable of holding a coherent conversation that you wind up with no memory of and things like that. And to answer one of the live questions, no, I do believe, and I may be wrong here, I think that Dr. Ford, the highest rank you ever held was sergeant. I think that's
E5.
the highest. E5.
That's correct.
Yeah, it was
actually. I when I was in Iraq, I was a counterintelligence agent, but the highest rank I ever held, and they would not do this. If you're a colonel or something, they wouldn't do this to you. Okay,
Right.
they just can't. Okay, and it's never been done. But an agent, okay, and like I said, and you've admitted, and on your show many times that I was lucky to be alive. I was lucky to be renditioned and get out of this thing alive.
Mm-hmm.
So rank in terms of intelligence really doesn't mean much, because when you're a human intelligence agent, you deal with generals, you deal with senior statesmen, you deal with presidents of other countries, kings, whoever. Okay, and so you never, and like I never ever once wore rank of any sort. Okay, and I was already well to do in civilian life, so doing this it wasn't a matter of money. It was a matter of what I enjoy and what I liked doing. And then I had spent several years training to do. Okay. I spent 30 years in the intelligence business.
Right.
Okay. And so 3 decades.
No, absolutely. And the thing is that rank is sort of irrelevant when it comes to the intelligence business, with one exception, and that is that a lot of times ranks are bestowed upon people in an improper fashion in order so that they can go to certain administrative positions. Things like that do happen. Some people end up with general stars that actually never earned them. Some people end up as colonels who, in all likelihood, if their military service was the only factor for it, they might be a PFC. Okay, that's the real bottom line about the rank. The rank is almost irrelevant, and in fact, the more useful assets are never any higher than a colonel, generally speaking. Once you are above that pay grade, so to speak, you actually are not operationally extremely useful. You're more administrative. So what we're talking about right now, and who Dr. Ford actually is somebody who was extremely useful from an operational standpoint. It means that he could get his hands dirty. He wasn't just making administrative decisions. He was on the ground, literally dealing with the assets, dealing with the real-time situations. Okay? That's what is so valuable about his viewpoint here, is that we're talking about the actual nitty-gritty of what occurred, as opposed to the administrative answer, the cover-up and the CYA that you would get from somebody who would have been, well, let's be honest, higher up in the food chain. And they follow through with their own agendas and generally end up in administrative positions in larger corporations. That's what they do.
That's it. Right. It's also a protective measure, too. If you have somebody that, say, is a colonel that falls into the hands of some very angry people that have been tortured, okay, and murdered, and they get their hands on you, say you're a colonel, and history is replete. The Middle East is replete with examples of this. Is boy, oh boy, do they love getting a hold of somebody that's high ranking, okay, because they assume that you know something, okay. It's assumed, not always the case, but you do know something, and they will keep you alive forever if they need to. Okay, and this has happened to high-ranking CIA agents, okay, and also colonels. A few names come to mind, and it was gruesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, the process that followed with these high-ranking people, it was gruesome, because it was assumed that they knew something, and they were kept alive for months. And in fact, I can't even talk about it because it's too gruesome to talk about and say what was done to these high-ranking intelligence people. Okay. In fact, I'm going to quit talking about it because it's bothering me. Okay, what was done to these people.
Okay, but let's just generally make this sort of caveat to explain this for people, though, real quick, and that is that rank in the intelligence arms of the military is not indicative of somebody's value anyway, okay? Because, again, like you said, sometimes, in fact, their ranks might even be held down in order so that they are a lower value target in a hot zone during operations, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, realistically, there's plenty of sergeants running around. It doesn't mean that automatically would put a bullseye on your back. Okay, that's kind of a helpful thing for you. In fact, especially when you're dealing with people that might end up being put into desperate situations in hot zones. So you can't think of it in terms of exactly what the rank of the individual is as to exactly what their experience is and everything else. There's a lot of cases where I've talked to guys who never held high military ranks, but were involved in super sensitive situations, high priority situations, and were operationally important. Okay, so that's all I got to say about that. And of course, we'll leave aside that whole topic of discussion now, because honestly, you
Well,
told me that we would probably have to check off at about 9:30 my time, and you know what? We've
right.
only got about 5 minutes left.
Well, yeah,
So,
I'm actually okay with the time, Chuck. So,
oh, you are.
I can extend a little bit. I just wanted to point out to your listeners, okay, actually at this point in my career, in my life, okay, that the rank is an interesting issue, okay, that is coming up now with the courts, okay, because funny thing happened on the way to the forum, all right,
Mhm.
is when I got back, I went to subpoena my entire records, okay, my entire set of intelligence records and my personnel records. Now, for your listeners, and this might sound ominous, but here we go. So you can call me general, you can call me admiral, you can call me anything you like, and here's why. Okay, because when I got back, not a single personnel file, not a single letter of an intelligence file concerning me, concerning my operations, existed. They had been completely expunged. And I'll never forget the words of the archivist, okay, who ran St. Louis. That's where my records were kept. She said, "With all due respect, sir, there is nothing in our records that show that you were ever in government service in any way, shape, or form."
Mhm.
All right. So that pretty much shows you how much our government appreciates being held to its own laws and appreciates the heroism, okay, and strength exhibited by its own fighting members. Okay, when they do something that embarrasses somebody politically, this is what is done to them. All
And
right,
and
they are
since
unpersoned, as they
since
say, as
ex-
they're disappeared. All
exactly
right, as they say in the Soviet Union.
since that time, okay, let's make something extremely clear here. Since that time, you have actually recovered the proof that you were in service, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a matter of they attempted to disappear it. Okay, so the proof does exist that you did serve, so on and so forth, and more to come on that on this show. By the way,
Right.
from a personal situation of mine, which I think will be interesting as well. But absolutely correct that they disappear these kind of records for the purposes of covering their own embarrassment, et cetera, et cetera. And you know that very well. So there you go.
Well, you're absolutely right. Like your listeners are beginning to realize, sure, I might be operating on 40% of my brain before, which is left from what was before I went to Iraq and this all happened. But the thing is I've never been dumb enough to assume that the government would take care of my own personal affairs. And so I specifically kept most of my information, and I had some very good researchers, okay, that helped me assemble all this information back together again, all right, including some information that I never thought I would see again. And to show you the determination, by the way, and I'll leave your listeners with this, and then I have to leave, is this is about 2 months ago, I had to fire an attorney of mine, and I found out that his son was working for the U.S. Attorney's Office, and this attorney had obviously been spoken to and dealt with by our government because he was passing all the legal information on my court case, the court case that is in the Ninth Circuit Court, all right, this attorney was passing all that information to the government. He was letting them know every single aspect. And I couldn't quite figure out why I kept getting my teeth kicked in, when I'd go into a courtroom. Okay, very simple. He was feeding them, telling them exactly what I was going to do and what information I had. Well, I fired him, of course, and now I've gone back, and he had all the SF, that means standard form 93s, 88s, SF 98, I'm sorry, SF 88s, and SF 600s. Those were all the forms, medical forms, that I kept, all the medical information on 63 detainees that were tortured to death in our custody, that I had to treat, I had to take care of, and all died in our custody. Okay, I was able to send that information out of Iraq, and it arrived to my attorney here, and he put it in his vault, and now I was just informed that that information has been destroyed. In retaliation, okay, he has destroyed that information on those 63 victims of our torture, all right? That's how serious this whole business is, okay, in dealing with the government. Our government does not like being held accountable or made to adhere to its own laws. If you think that our government wants to obey its own laws, contact the U.S. Attorney's Office and ask what their function is. Their function is to make sure that the government does not ever have to pay attention or adhere to its own laws that all of us have to. All of us do, okay? All civilians, all taxpayers have to pay attention to the law and adhere to it. The government does not, all right? And that was driven home to me when I was informed that critical information concerning those 63 lives. It sounds like not a much, but when you talk about 63 individuals that were tortured to death, okay, in the greatest war crimes in U.S. history, that is a lot, all right? Given the fact that our president, George W. Bush, at the time said that nobody in Abu Ghraib prison had died from interrogation, all right? Nobody had died. Well, I'm afraid that's not quite correct, Mr. Former President. And by the way, I was able to reconstruct most of that medical information on those victims. So I do have it now, okay? But this will let your listeners know the government is not here to protect you. The government is here to exist because of you, all right? The government is here not to protect you from terrorists. It's here to make its existence legitimate. Mm-hmm. Okay? That is what I can say to the American people and your listeners. It isn't here to protect you. It is here to support and perpetrate its own existence. And there has never been such a fabulous opportunity for our government to do what it's doing and control the American citizenry like it has done and is doing right now. All right. So anyway, thank you so much for having me as always on your show, Chuck. All right. So I do have to leave. Okay. I'm actually going to a birthday party of an old intelligence buddy. All right. So I'm off to that, and I wish your listeners, the very best. And thank you for listening to me. And hopefully I won't get too many, hate emails or call-ins to your show asking what kind of 5150 he invites on his shows. But anyway, thank you so much for having me again, and very best to Kim and your son. So thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Ford. The information you provide is absolutely essential for people to understand what is actually happening. The government protects itself, not its citizenry at this point, and it protects itself while it breaks the laws that it pretends to enforce upon the rest of us. That is about the total of the message there, and that is not only here on United States soil, but around the world. You have a good night, sir, and enjoy that party, and you and I will speak again very soon.
Very best, Chuck. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So, Dr. Frank Gregory Ford, actually, technically. And if you guys want to call in and help me close out the show, comment about anything that we've discussed tonight, or if you want to comment about anything else, the phone number is 718-717-8296. Again, 718-717-8296. Or, if you happen to be on my Skype list, I will join you straight into the call as well. If not, then I'm going to continue on with my train of thought. And yes, just for clarification one more time, Frank Gregory Ford is a former intelligence officer. He was a sergeant, technically, at the time that he was in the Iraqi theater and did not have a career post-2003 because he had been illegally renditioned by United States military/intelligence assets in the midst of all the chaos that ensued based on the enhanced interrogation. Tired of using that term. Let's try torture. Okay? So, based on all of the situations that arose from the torture, his attempt to report it, and his attempts to blow the whistle regarding the weapons of mass destruction, the actual discovery of things that were weapons of mass destruction, okay? Not something manufactured in Iraq, but actually having its origins easily traceable to U.S.-based corporate assets that sold this stuff to the Hussein regime in Iraq. Can't stress that enough. And actually, he wanted to get to some other topics tonight, but because of this story that came out of Vice News a couple of days ago, I thought he might want to speak to it. And I'm very glad that he did. So, again, 718-717-8296 if you want to call in. If not, you know what? I'm going to go back to the article. And with these last, 20 minutes or so, I guess I'll give you my thoughts after we go through a few more things in this article. So back to it. Republican leaders in the House and Senate approved this program back in 2002, 2003, 2004. And not only approved the program, but encouraged us to go further. This, again, is the program of enhanced interrogation, and that's my commentary, not the article's. Back to the article. They thought we were risk-averse when we stopped the program for a period of time. So what's the only way that the Senate can get themselves out of the discussion? Question mark. To say that the CIA lied to them at the time about what we were doing and about the effectiveness of the program. That's the only way to get themselves off the hook. I can't prove any of that. I'm speculating. This all coming from Mike Morell, former deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Vice News tried numerous times to obtain a comment from Feinstein, but her office failed to respond to our queries, because, again, this is an article from Vice News. Back to the article. However, a day before Morell's book went on sale, Feinstein took the unprecedented step of issuing a press release attacking Morell's contradictory claims about the torture program and said he did not even bother to read the full 6,700-page report. Feinstein's office then issued a 54-page point-by-point rebuttal to all of the assertions Morell made in his book and about the efficacy of the program. Morell, who now works for a private security firm, of course, founded by former aides to Hillary Clinton, told Vice News that the U.S. is engaged in an intelligence war. Quote, in this new era of terrorism, the enemy is very hard to find, but very easy to kill, end quote, he said. Quote, the finding, which is the hard part, is all about intelligence. So this is an intelligence war. Ellipsis points. You cannot capture and kill your way out of this, period. The other problem that you have to deal with is how do you stop the creation of a new terrorist, question mark. How do you deal with the radicalization problem of young men and women around the globe? That's something that we have not done well as a country or as a coalition of countries. Ellipsis points. And it's not going to go away until we get our arms around that. So now my commentary here is that, of course, he's still supporting the agency line regarding how much we need to be cautious about the radicalized Westerners, because that's what would pertain to our domestic situation, justify the DHS, justify the wonderful surveillance programs that we're dealing with on a daily. Anybody getting this yet? Are you figuring out why I'm telling you this story? Fine, back to the article. An earlier version of this report incorrectly said the CIA's pre-war Iraq intelligence concluded that Saddam Hussein colluded with al-Qaeda. The story has been updated. Okay. Yipes. And this was by Jason Leopold. I believe it was Jason Leopold. Let me just make sure. Via Vice News. Let's see. Yes, Jason Leopold. And it was published June 25th, 2015 at 1:35 p.m. Okay, like I said, I would have jumped on this earlier, but then again on Thursday I interviewed Payday Monsanto, and I was really just having a good time there discussing his art, discussing what he does, because I enjoy it. But either way, if we don't understand that this is still a heavily vetted piece of propaganda that's been issued by Morell in order to continuously justify the need for torture, the need for be very, very afraid, because there are still terrorists under your bed, to be very, very afraid of the Al-Qaeda boogeyman, despite the fact that we have supported them, we have trained them, we have backed them. They are literally something that should be counted as a U.S. asset on the grand chessboard, but it really doesn't matter. Let's remember that ISIS is still in the game, and of course, all these things have to do with the intelligence game. Right? Nah, none of that's true. We have to be very, very afraid of the radicalized Muslims. Because after all, they are the enemy because they hate us for our freedoms. If you are brain damaged enough to believe that particular line of thinking, I don't know why you're listening to me. I don't know why you're hearing me, and I don't know how to reach the disabled if you are that terribly disabled intellectually, if you are that terribly stunted mentally. Okay? But of course, all of this is never taken and put into its proper context. You don't realize that you are not being served by the intelligence assets. A lot of you don't realize that you're not being taken as anything other than an inconvenient, possibly enemy combatant in one form or another. You are just fodder for the propaganda. And believe me, if you get out of line, there are many ways that we can deal with you. Yes, this is the policy. This is the new normal. This is the reality of the post 9/11 existence. This is what they evolved from when they couldn't sell you the Middle Eastern terrorist boogeyman in the 1970s and 80s. When they still had the Russian threat, the big Red Scare that still could be seized upon for that time, all the way into, the 90s. You know, when East and West Germany came back together, and that was supposed to be a frightening prospect. But of course, if you're dealing with surrogate warfare and you're looking to manipulate a nation, Germany is plenty convenient. And why not 2 times in a row, when we're going to declare a world war, have an ignition point like Bosnia, Herzegovina, etc., the former Yugoslavia, always playing a role because, well, there just aren't as many eyes in the international community on it, so you can't get busted so easily perpetrating your false flags, utilizing propaganda campaigns in order to manipulate and subjugate other populations, political systems that actually have nothing to do with the United States, so on and so forth. Well, once the Soviet threat was no longer viable for propaganda use, they needed a new one. They needed a new one. So we were meant to think about domestic terrorism. We were meant to think about individuals who were willing to speak out against the party line, the singular party that's actually made up of the two factions, which are really indistinguishable from one another, the not blue and red states, but the purple states of the alleged United States of what used to be America. And as I say that, a nice lightning strike outside. Don't know if that was picked up by the microphone, but damn, I couldn't have planned that better if I tried. So, why does this bother me? Because understand this, when they explain to you who the enemy actually is, when those on high try to explain to you that they hate us for our freedoms, when those on high tell you that our children are the targets, because don't forget, children are a rather sympathetic segment of society at all times, never really truly responsible for what they do, but always subject to the influence of the nefarious as well as the benevolent. Okay? Remember that our children, our young people, are actually the targets of all this stuff, but the truth is that the total population is actually the targets. We are meant to be divided and conquered among one another. All sorts of techniques in use at all times and in full effect. Not only the racial divide, but the paranoia divides. The fact that they want to make sure that there is a significant segment of the population that absolutely believes that the Manchurian candidate in the White House has been placed there as a matter of protecting the Muslim people who are going to bring Sharia law to the United States sometime very soon. And this guy has the brilliance to go on a comedian's podcast and make these sorts of comments and use the N-word. All a staged, managed piece of nonsense to keep you engaged, to not understand that really what you're looking at is servants of the intelligence committees and communities, plural, intelligence communities, okay, and the greater corporate interests, plural, that actually control the flow of information, control the flow of the products and the various types of poisons which are introduced into the total of the population at all times. That is the reality we find ourselves in. No longer in a representative republic, but actually in an an oligarchy. An oligarchy which is masked by the appearance to the uninitiated, the uneducated, that we still exist in a representative republic, although for those whose IQ scores do not exceed room temperature, we live in a democracy. But that's okay too. If you think they're not going to resurrect the Red Threat, if you think that we're not going to resurrect various other stage-managed boogeymen, and the meat puppets are not going to make sure that they attempt to propagandize you about this, you're wrong. But let's understand this, that not only are the mainstream meat puppets manipulating you, but never ever forget that just because somebody appears to be outside of the mainstream does not mean they are on your side. And I'm trying to drive this home more and more. Okay? Fact is, there are a lot of wonderful misdirections that are fed to those who seem to be outside of the mainstream, because you've abandoned the giant camp and you've decided to be a contrarian. Does not mean that you understand all of the manipulation and the various levels, the extremely interesting, fascinating, multicolored layers of the onion. So that is that. Be discerning. Use whatever intelligence you have left. If it has not been entirely destroyed by the fluoride, attempt to see your world around you, not to project upon it your own prejudices. Try to think for yourselves. That's all I can say. That is all I can say. So, I'm just about out of time. I probably got about 8 minutes. Well, yeah, probably about 8 minutes left. I know that a replay of Ochelli is going to be on after me, called Reality Radio. And if you're listening to me live, I do advise you stick around for it. If you're catching me further on down the stream, go check out Andrew Ochelli. Interesting guy, whom I don't necessarily agree with all the time, but I do believe actually is speaking to a lot of truths. One of the people that I actually enjoy listening to, although I have turned off most of what I consider to be alternative media in my own personal stream at this point, because I am thoroughly disgusted with the misdirection at this point. And I'm not just talking about Panic Attack Jones. There's a lot of you, and some of you I've even tried to contact directly personally. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to try anymore to explain to someone how they're misleading their audiences and how they need to get back to facts and evidence and reality in order to trace what's actually occurring, what we're actually witnessing unfold on this interesting slice of terror. So, again, I want to thank anybody who decided to tune in and take a listen to me on the Ochelli Effect tonight here at ucy.tv. Of course, if you're catching it further on down the stream, I do advise you to go to ucy.tv/TOE. And again, as I said at the top of the show, I do thank you, Patricia, for doing what you did this week. You are much appreciated. Patricia Braunschwaller, I believe, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that name properly, but thank you, dear. You are definitely you've been more supportive at a critical turning point for me than you know, so I do appreciate you, and I appreciate anybody who has given me the time to make a presentation to them, no matter where you're listening to it. And for those of you who continue to pound me with nasty messages, and for those of you who continue to come at me with your criticisms and name calling and accusations and etc., etc., you know what? Thank you for listening too. Because if I'm pissing you off, I might be approaching reawakening what I'm assuming are dead brain cells in your skull. And that's all I got to say to you. Anyway, moving forward, I'll tell you what, I'm going to try and get some very interesting guests coming up soon. I hope that you guys enjoy them. Of course, on Tuesday, we will be joined by Roger Landry again, but the second half of that show, if all goes well, ought to be something of a surprise. Not even sure if I'm going to drop a meme about it beforehand, because that could be a really remarkable broadcast, somebody that has not gotten to be heard from anywhere else that I know of. Also, want to thank JJ for helping me with a piece of contact information regarding somebody who I've wanted to talk to for a very long time, JJ Inc., Mr. James Freeland, who hosts Against the Wall here on UCY. Do definitely love him as well. And although many other people in many other places seem to not understand my position at this point regarding certain things, and I'm not ignoring anybody, by the way. Again, I got a couple of angry messages about not responding to people right away. A couple of days here, I had my power going in and out. Anybody who was listening to Payday Monsanto interview on Thursday night knows that I actually lost power during a broadcast. So, my apologies to those of you that I have not gotten to. I promise you that if the storm subsides tonight long enough, I will be on the computer most of the night trying to get back to everybody. So, again, thank you no matter how it is you've decided to find the show. I do, again, ask you to go to ucy.tv/TOE. The link to the YouTube channel playlist is there. The archives, in case you want to catch other presentations I've done, are there. There is a donate button there for me. There is a donate button there for the network. Either of these donations are appreciated. There is also a bunch of tabs at the top of the page to show you other shows, to show you other things going on the network. There's a lot of interesting stuff. Things that I would recommend right away would be Anti-Media, which runs 5 nights a week on this channel. Definitely Andrew Shally, who I mentioned earlier. JJ, who I think only has 2 days a week right now, Against the Wall. Definitely Souvenir, Saturday mornings here. Very, very, it's a little intellectually heavy, not always loaded with the entertainment, but intellectually extremely informative. Probably one of the most informative shows possible. A couple of new things that have come up on the network, which are very interesting to me. Chris Jackson Rojas with Rebellion Radio on Sunday. I like that kid, and don't care if he don't like me anymore or not. It's fine. He is an excellent guy who you're going to watch flourish, and I do believe develop into an even better presenter than he is now. So you can watch the evolution of a broadcaster there if you like. Also, Alan Watt has an interesting show on here now. And there is all sorts of interesting things on here, no matter what your focus is or your desires might be for alternative information. Of course, before the first cup in the morning, the Boss Ladies Show. If you are somebody who wants to look into transhumanism and technology and things like that, I definitely do advise that show, and go get the archives on it, because she's always talking about that, and it is one of the most important things that we do have to consider as we move forward into the alleged future. So that's just about it. Like I said, my last 2 minutes here, and I think I've said just about everything I want to say on a Saturday night. Oh, that's right, I did forget to say this as well. You know, there is a Facebook group for discussing this radio show, which I do encourage you, if you utilize your federal book or your FBI book, go right ahead and at least do some good with it and go on there. And we have a lot of interesting discussions in the Ochelli Effect radio show discussion group. There is another page for the Ochelli Effect, which serves as a news feed where I have a few very fascinating and diverse contributors that do not give you the typical mainstream side of things. And you can contact me through that as well. Also, although I don't look at my email except maybe once a week, you can email me at chuck1972@lycos, lycos.com. And I do attempt to answer every email. Occasionally something gets thrown into spam, so my apologies ahead of time for that. But not based on the fact that I'm ignoring you. I try to answer every single one of the emails that asks a pertinent question, makes a request, etc., etc. Also, guest suggestions and requests and things like that should be posted into the Ochelli Effect radio show group on Facebook, or if you want to contact me on Twitter at Ochelli Effect. Also, I've introduced myself into Pinterest and a bunch of other places. So any one of these like social media things where you can share information, I'm trying to get myself acquainted with, even though I do feel very much like the old man who doesn't understand the new technology. I'm doing the best I can, people. So anyway, once again, I do appreciate every single person who has heard any word I've said tonight. And I want to once again thank Frank Gregory Ford for coming on the show with me. You are much appreciated. Oh, one last suggestion for UCY, by the way, if you have the intellectual integrity to handle it, is Brandon Turberville does a show called Truth on the Tracks. And definitely one of those people that I enjoy and admire the information that he produces at brandonturberville.com. Okay, so these are points of interest if you're on the UCY site and you're getting bored.